Okay, today we're going to talk about the Cult Access, the Cult Gateway, the Cult Control, and the Cult Devotion. We're going to look really in depth into all of these bikes and figure out which bike is right for you. Now, there's a very big possibility that none of these bikes are going to be right for you because I'm going to be completely honest. If I think they suck, if I think they're a ripoff, I'm going to tell you that. To find which bike is right for you, fill out the free bike recommendation. Links in the description, but I will tell you 3 bikes that I think are perfect for you. It's going to help you out a lot. Let's get right into the video. Let's find the right bike for you. You need to know 5 things about this bike. 1. This bike only comes in 2 different color options. It comes in a black and it comes in a raw. This is kind of basic compared to the Devotion and the Gateway color options, so I'm a little bit disappointed. 2, this is Cult's lowest priced 20-inch option. It's at the very bottom in quality and in price of their 2022 20-inch bike line. 3, this bike costs $359. 4, it weighs around 25 pounds, although that exact weight isn't known for sure. It's not listed anywhere yet, but the 2021 model was about 25 pounds, so we can safely guesstimate that the Access is also going to weigh around 25 pounds. I'll update it on the score sheet as soon as I know the real answer. And number 5, this bike is best for those smaller riders because it has a really small top tube size, which is designed for small riders to get on and learn BMX. Now, the quality of the Access is, as you'd expect, it's fairly low quality. The frame, forks, and bars are all made from high-tensile steel. High-tensile steel is the weaker option that manufacturers use when they're making bikes. If you see something with full chromoly, this is a much stronger and a much better option. High-tensile steel, like I said, it's weaker, tends to bend over time, and it just can't withstand big drops and big gaps. Now, for a smaller guy that weighs less than like 150 pounds, less than 180 pounds, anywhere around there, this high tensile steel is going to be fine as long as they're not an absolute shredder, taking it off big gaps and big drops and things like that. But if someone like me, 220 pounds, crawls onto this high tensile steel bike, it will not last very long. So if you are a heavier guy, 1, check out something higher quality. You need something full chromoly, but if you're a smaller guy, this high tensile steel, don't let it necessarily scare you away from this bike because it's going to be okay for you because you're not heavy enough to cause a bunch of damage on it. Now the wheels are single wall, and again, this is the lower quality option. Double wall rims are much stronger and much better, but if you're a lighter rider, just like the frame, these single wall rims aren't going to cause too much of an issue. I've bent a handful of single wall rims, so double wall is always the safest way to go. But, if your budget is kind of tight, going with these single wall rims, if you are really light and really small, isn't going to affect you. But if you're my size or bigger or even a little smaller, if you're above 170 pounds, you will thrash this bike. So just quit watching the review right now and go watch something that's mid-level quality and save up your money until you can afford that. Sealed bearings play a pretty big role in lower quality bikes because it can help distinguish how good this low quality bike is with another low quality bike. And the Cult Access has sealed bearings in the bottom bracket, but it does not have sealed bearings in the rim or in the wheels. So the front hub is unsealed and the rear cassette is unsealed. And all this means is that you wouldn't get as long out of these hubs as you would if they were sealed bearings. The unsealed bearings, one time I thought, I'm going to take my bike apart. And for whatever reason, I decided to take the hub apart. Ball bearings went everywhere. They're probably still in the garage somewhere. I never found them all. And that is a disaster, especially. And then I got something that was sealed and I did it. And I was like, whoa. I was expecting the bearings to fall out and then they never did. So just know, the unsealed bearings aren't going to last as long as the sealed bearings. And that's one thing that makes this bike a little bit cheaper and a little bit lower quality. Now, Cult is known for having some weird geometry, and the geometry of the Access is no different. Now, it has a small 20.00 inch top tube. Again, this is for smaller riders. Okay, it's not going to be very good for someone my size. It would just be really counterproductive. If you Google Dougsterbob size guide, my size guide will come up and it'll tell you exactly what size you need and how different sizes are going to affect your style of riding and the way that you ride the bike. So make sure you check that out if you're unsure if 20.00 is a good size for you. Now it has a 75-degree head tube angle. This is normal, nothing crazy here, but the standover height We don't actually know. So it's probably 9 inches, but it's not actually listed. So we can safely assume that the Cult Access is going to have a very similar standover height. The bottom bracket height is 11.8 inches, and this is kind of taller than normal. Most bikes are around 11.6, and this taller bottom bracket height is raising you off the ground by 0.2 inches, which doesn't seem like much, but it does make the bike feel a little bit more snappy and a little bit more responsive. And it also sets you up a little bit higher so that your bars don't feel as high. And this is an interesting thing because Colt's one of the few bike companies to have their bottom bracket height so high. And this combats the next thing, which I'm about to say, is the chainstay length is very long. This is a 13.6 inch chainstay, 13.65, and this is crazy long. Most bikes are around 13.25 or around 13. So this 13.65 inch chainstay is going to feel really stable. It's going to feel really controlled, and overall it's going to feel really mellow. Now, Cult designed the frame this way so that younger riders have something that doesn't feel so twitchy and it doesn't feel so unstable. This longer chainstay gives them a nice stable ride to understand the basics and the fundamentals and the foundation of BMX comfortably without feeling like their bike's going to twitch around and kill them. You don't want that to happen, right? So this bike is pretty stable, but the higher bottom bracket height will add a teeny tiny bit of responsiveness to the bike. So with all that being said, how will the Cult Access feel? And like I said, it's going to feel really stable. It's designed perfectly for a newer rider who has no idea what BMX is like, what doing tricks is like, and the stable ride helps them get the fundamentals down without being so stressed out all the time. Now, we need to talk about the Dougsterbob scores. I'm going to throw them up on screen, but this is a scoring system that I created that helps you figure out how good each bike is in street, park, dirt, how good's the quality, and then we talk about a value factor, which figures out how good the bike is in terms of value. You can get this score sheet for free. The link is in the description. All you have to do is put in your email address and I'll send it to you. It's got over 80 bikes on there, so you can compare how good the Cult Access is for street versus the Cult Devotion, versus the Sunday Blueprint, versus the Kink Switch. Like whatever you want to compare it to, you're able to do that on this score sheet. So make sure that you get that sent to you. Again, link is in the description. But because of these scores on this bike that's up on screen, it's not very specific for any type of riding. Now, the more stable frame feeling that we talked about earlier is going to make this bike less good for park because park requires a certain level of technical riding, and this bike really won't be very good for that. But for street and for dirt, this stable feeling is pretty solid. This will be especially fun on the pump tracks or on some small dirt jumps. You can make upgrades either way. You can make upgrades to make it more street specific or more park specific, but as it comes, it's pretty average for dirt and for street. Again, you can make the upgrades, but you don't necessarily need them, especially if you haven't decided what type of riding you like to do. Now, what about the value factor that I talked about early? Well, the value factor of this bike is 2.78. And to be honest, this is kind of low. There are other options with a similar value factor score that are right around the same price tag. And some of those would be the 2022 Sabrosa Altus. This bike is $360 and it has a value score of around a 4. So close to double what this bike is, and the price is $1 more. That's pretty crazy. Another one is the Verdi AV. Now this bike's $369, so it's only $9 more than the Altus, and it has a value factor score of 4.88, so right around a 5. You can spend just a little bit more money and get a much better quality bike, but check out the in-depth reviews on both of these bikes before you make a decision, because one of these might be better for you than the Cult Access. Now, the biggest question that I get is, would I actually recommend this bike? And overall, because of this value factor, I probably wouldn't. There are other options that are similarly priced with a better value factor. So I'd probably recommend those to you. Now, there's 5 things that you need to know about the Cult Gateway. 1, it has 4 different color options. It comes in a raw, a Cavalry blue, a teal, and a black. The second thing you need to know is that the teal and the black come with really cool Cult camo tires. The third thing is that this bike costs $429. The fourth thing is that the weight is around 25 pounds. We actually don't know a specific number since Cult hasn't released that information, but the 2021 Gateway was right around 25 pounds, so it's safe to assume that this is going to weigh about the same. And the fifth thing you need to know about the Cult Gateway is that it has some kind of strange geometry. We're going to get into that in the geometry section, but just know it's not your typical geometry. Now you might be wondering if the Cult Gateway is good quality, and it's actually not too bad. The frame is made from chromoly, so the front end of the bike is full chromoly. The top tube, the down tube, and the head tube are made of stronger chromoly. The back end of the bike is made from weaker high-tensile steel. This kind of material bends over time as you start to do spins and just put some general abuse on the bike. So it is a big plus to have chromoly in the front end of the bike, but just know that that back end can still suffer some damage and take a beating when you progress to a higher level of riding. The forks have a teeny tiny bit of chromoly. That steer tube that runs up through the frame is going to be full chromoly, while the legs are only high tensile steel. Very similar to the frame, these legs can bend, especially if you nose case a dirt jump or do disasters on quarter pipes. That stress on the flexing of the bike just makes those fork legs bend if they're not full chromoly. The bars are weaker high tensile steel and the wheels are single wall. Single wall is going to be a lot weaker than double wall rims. Double wall rims are, well, twice as strong and they can withstand to a lot more abuse. So for mid-level riders, I always suggest getting something with double wall rims instead of these single wall rims because the back wheel can kind of get expensive to replace. This bike doesn't really have any aftermarket parts, but the Cult Vans tires are pretty sick and they're a pretty popular choice. They're technically aftermarket, but these are only the 60 PSI versions and not the 100 PSI versions. Okay, and what's up with that weird geometry that I was talking about? Well, the top tube is a 20.5 inch, which is about par for this level of quality. Most bikes around this level of quality are 20.5 inch because it's a size that most people tend to be. It's not super small for those really small riders, but it's not a 21 inch XL version for those really tall riders. It's right there in the middle. Make sure you Google Dougsterbob's size guide to check my size guide and see if this size is right for you, what size you need, and how different top tube sizes will affect your style and affect your riding. The standover height isn't listed on Cult's website, but it was a 9 inch last year. So we're going to assume this year it's also a 9 inch, but we don't know that for sure. The bottom bracket height is something that's a little odd. This is the second thing that's odd about this geometry, but it's an 11.8. Having a taller bottom bracket height like 11.8 is going to make the bike feel really responsive and higher off the ground, so spins will be a lot more snappy. However, the chainstay is 13.65 inches, which is one of the longest chainstays that you're going to find on a complete bike. Most bikes are around 13 to 13.2, so this 13.6 inch chainstay is going to provide a lot of stability and a lot of control for newer riders who are riding this bike. But with all that geometry, how's this bike going to actually feel? Well, because of the mixture of that really long chainstay with the taller bottom bracket, it's still going to feel pretty stable. Cult designed this bike to feel stable so that newer riders didn't get on something that was really twitchy. Twitchy is the right word. Something that was really twitchy and hard to control. So this longer chainstay is still going to feel really stable despite the higher bottom bracket, but it does get riders up higher off the ground and makes a good combination with the 9 inch rise bars. Okay, so next we got to talk about the Dougsterbob scores. This is a scoring system that I created to rank each bike for how good it is in street, park, dirt, how good the quality is, and then we talk about the overall value factor. This score sheet is completely free and there's over 80 bikes listed on there. If you want the score sheet to compare this bike to any other bike on your mind, hit the link in the description, put in your email address, and you'll get the link sent directly to you. Now, I'm going to put the scores up here on the screen while I talk about what type of riding this bike is actually for. And due to the more mellow geometry of the frame and the bike in general, this bike isn't going to be very good for snappy and responsive park riding. It's going to be best for more stable street or even dirt/pump track riding. It's a stable feeling bike, so you're going to be able to ride those things right off the bat and right out of the box. If you want to specialize in street or park or dirt, you can make some specific upgrades to achieve that goal, but it doesn't come like it right out of the box. But what about the value? Well, the Cult Gateway actually scored pretty high in the Dougsterbob value factor. It scored a 6.51, which is a lot higher than other bikes around this quality level and even other similar priced bikes. I'm impressed with the level of value that Cult provided with this bike. A similar priced option is the Sunday Blueprint. This bike also costs $429. It comes in a handful of different size options, but the value score was only a 2.33. This is because the quality of the Blueprint is significantly lower than the quality of the Gateway for about the same price. Now, the Kink Gap scored a value factor score of an 8, and it's only about $30 cheaper. So if you want to look at either of those two bikes that I just mentioned, I have in-depth reviews on all of them on Dougsterbob.com or on the YouTube channel. Just search for it and I'm sure it's going to come up. But the serious question here is, would I actually recommend it? And I'm the bike wizard. I know everything about bikes, and I would recommend this bike. Now, you've got to make sure that this is the type of bike that you want for the type of riding that you do. You need to make sure that this is within your budget. You need to make sure that this is the right top tube size for you and you like how that geometry is going to feel. Now, the Cult Control is actually a fairly decent bike. It's going to cost right at $500. It comes in two color options. It comes in a black and it comes in a raw. So it doesn't come in any flashy colors, kind of like the Devotion did. These are just real basic black, raw colors. Pretty classic for Cult. They don't usually do too many crazy color options. So $500, two color options, and there's not too much else to say for it. It's about $70 cheaper than the Devotion, but it still comes with pretty decent quality. So the quality of the Cult Control is actually pretty decent. It's going to come with a full chromoly frame. This is a lot stronger than a high tensile steel frame, which can bend and break depending on the amount of abuse that you put the frame to. Full chromoly frame is definitely the way to go. So this is off to a great start. The forks are going to be some chromoly, some high tensile steel. The steer tube, that piece of tubing that runs through the top of the frame, is going to be full chromoly, while the legs are going to be high tensile steel. And I've had this issue with high tensile steel leg forks before. When you're doing disasters, when you're doing dirt jumps, you can case it and those fork legs bend out. If you look at somebody on a lower end bike at your skate park, you might notice that instead of being like this, their forks are tilted like this. And that's just because they've taken some abuse and they're not full chromoly legs. So while this is a little bit better than full high tensile steel, it's still not the best because those legs can bend and over time, okay? Now, one thing to note is that these rims on the Cult Control are not both double wall. If you take this information off of Cult's website, they're gonna list all of their rims as Cult Match rims. And while this is partially true, it's a little misleading because Cult Match rims are generally known as their double wall aftermarket rims. But Cult also, essentially white labeled their single wall rims that come on complete bikes as Cult Match rims, and they don't clearly distinguish which ones are Cult Match double wall and which ones are Cult Match single wall. So Dan's Comp on their website, they definitely made it really clear for you guys while you're buying a bike that the single wall rim is up front and the double wall rim is in the back. This is similar to some of Sunday's bikes where they did a single wall rim up front and a double wall rim up back. Having this is a little bit better because the back rim does take a lot of impact when you're doing spins, when you're doing big drops. The back rim is going to take the majority of impact. So having a single wall front rim isn't the end of the world, although getting a bike with two double wall rims is a better option. Okay, so I've had a lot of people argue with me last year because it's not clearly marked which one's single wall, if they're double wall or whatever. This is the deal. The Cult Control has a single wall front rim and a double wall back rim. Again, that's not a deal breaker because your front wheel, unless you nose case something, which you're going to hurt a lot of stuff nose casing something, it's not the end of the world, okay? But it is not double wall. So there you go, we're gonna settle that. And the weight isn't really out yet, but if you go off of the 2021 Cult Control, this year's Cult Control is gonna weigh about 25 pounds. And this isn't with any pegs, no hub guards, okay? So 25 pounds, no pegs, no hub guards. full chromoly frame, partially chromoly forks, and single wall in front, double wall rim in back. This is it's okay quality. It's not the best, obviously, but this is only a $500 bike priced for newer riders who are approaching the mid-level. Now we got the quality out of the way. That's a lot of information. Let's talk about the geometry. So the Cult Control has a 20.75 inch top tube. This is a 1/4 of an inch shorter than the Cult Devotion, and it's really, really, really important. I cannot stress it enough. It's really important to get the correct top tube size. A lot of people say, hey, this is only a 1/4 of an inch. Does it really matter? And the answer is absolutely. I switched from a 21 to a 20.7 inch top tube, and I noticed the craziest difference you just could not even imagine. It really makes a difference. And so what I want you to do is you need to Google Dougsterbob size guide, and that's going to take you to my website, and it's going to have the size guide listed out. Click on the height, and it'll tell you pretty much 3 different frame size options and how each size is going to affect your riding. So for example, if 20.75 is the perfect size for you, it's going to balance stability and it's going to balance responsiveness. But if you're a little bit taller, getting a 20.75 is going to feel a lot more responsive. And it's really important for you to understand that before you buy the bike. So double check that, okay? Double check that that's the right size for you. The chainstay is also a little weird because it's a 13.65 inch chainstay. This is one of the biggest chainstays that I've seen. The Cult Devotion is the same, and some of Haro's bikes have really long chainstays. What the longer chainstay is going to do is it's going to make the bike more stable in the back end. So spins are going to feel a little more sluggish, and it's just not going to be as responsive. It's going to be harder to pick the bike up for manuals, but once you're in a manual, it's a lot easier to control because it's not going to loop out as easy as a shorter chainstay would. The standover height is unknown. They haven't listed what the standover height is. I'm going to guess it's right around 9 inches, just like last year's model. And the head tube angle is 75 degrees. This is the exact same as average head tube angles. Okay, this is an average head tube angle size. So next thing we need to talk about is the Dougsterbob scores. Now, this is a scoring system that I created to help you figure out how each bike does in different areas of BMX. You can see how it performs in park, in dirt, in street, how the quality is, and then you can compare it to like 80 different bikes. So if you want this score sheet, the link is in the description. Just put in your email address and I'll send it to you, and then you can compare whichever bike you're looking at to a ton of different bikes. It's really helpful. But anyway, let's just get right into the Cult Control's Dougsterbob scores. In the street section, it only scored a 3. Now this is a 3 out of 10, and keep in mind, very few bikes score as high as a 10. They've got to hit a lot of marks to score that high. So a 3 in the grand scheme of things compared to like the Kink Launch, this is an okay score. A lot of these beginner bikes are not specific in one area, and the Cult Control is not specific for street, because it doesn't come with pegs, it doesn't come with a free coaster. There's a lot of things that it doesn't come with right out of the box. Street riding is still possible with it. You just have to do a few upgrades for it. So in the park section, the Cult Control only scored a 1.67. We're going to go ahead and round this up to a 2, but this is not a park specific bike. To be park specific, we're looking for a really responsive geometry and some gyros, things like that. This bike, you cannot put gyro tabs on it because of the hourglass head tube, so you're not able to run a gyro. It's got that really long chainstay. Overall, it's not going to be very snappy or responsive in the park. However, in the dirt section, it scored a 4.33. We're going to round this down to a 4. This is actually a fairly decent score. There's some dirt specific bikes that scored a lot higher, but as a beginner bike, this bike is perfect for riding pump tracks and riding small tabletop dirt jumps, because that bigger chainstay and that bigger geometry is going to make it feel really stable and really controlled. Now for quality, it scored a 4.5. This is because of the full chromoly frame and the partial chromoly forks, but the single wall front rim and the other high tensile steel aspects of the bike bring the quality score down just a little bit. Now this score is significantly higher than a lot of the $300 to $400 bikes, but it's nowhere near those $1,000 bikes, obviously. This is a pretty good quality score, and like I always say, I'm always looking for full chromoly frame, forks, and bars. This hit the mark on the frame, not quite the forks and not quite the bars, so it's getting there, but it's just not quite It's not quite there, what I look for a mid-level quality bike. For a beginner level quality bike, this is a really good option because it's gonna last you into the beginning of mid-level riding, which is when you're doing bars, you're doing whips, you're doing 360s, and you're doing tricks like that. Some similar options to the Cult Control would be the Sunday Primer, which is a lot lower quality option. It's a little bit cheaper, or the Kink Whip. And overall, the Kink Whip is going to be a little bit higher quality because it's going to come with full chromoly frame, forks and bars, and double wall rims, and it's right at the same price. So those are some other bike options that you really should check out before you make the purchase of the Cult Control. Now, if you love Cult, you love the colors, like, that's awesome, but I do want to let you know that there is some better priced options with a little bit better quality. Make sure you check those out. Now, potential issues. Some of the potential issues that I see with the Cult Control I've already discussed. I think you need to be careful when you start progressing and you're doing big jumps or big gaps because those forks and those high tensile steel bars can bend over time. Now, again, it's a lot different for me, a 215-pound person versus a 120-pound rider on the bike. Obviously, it's going to take a lot more abuse from me than someone who's smaller. So just kind of think about those things though, is that this bike is not really high quality and you're gonna out progress it if you're serious about BMX and if you start riding a ton. And that's just something that happens. So just be ready to upgrade those parts as you go so that you don't keep breaking things. Who is the Cult Control for? So the Cult Control is for somebody who likes to ride street and likes to ride dirt. If you plan to ride street, make sure you have a little bit extra money that you can upgrade some pegs, some hub guards, and maybe even a free coaster. If you like to ride dirt, I definitely recommend upgrading to dirt specific tires. This person is the perfect size for a 20.75 inch top tube, and they have about $500. The person who gets this bike should be riding for a little bit, but it's also not a bad brand new bike for a beginner as long as it's the right size for you. Now, it is not for somebody who's already riding at a mid-level and beating bikes up. There's a lot of better option bikes for people who are riding at a higher level. This is for someone who's pretty new to the sport and just figuring out some of the basic tricks. Now, would I recommend the Cult Control? And I would, if you can't afford the Cult Devotion or if the Cult Devotion is too big. I do really like the Cult Control, and to be fair, I think some of the components, the quality of the components are just a little bit better than Kink. So I do recommend this bike if it's the right size for you and if you love Cult. If you're looking for something best value, there's a better option for sure. All right, so the 2022 Devotion comes in a Panza white, a Cavalry blue, and a black. 3 color options that are pretty unique. I mean, the black is pretty boring, but the other options are unique, and the price only went up $20. Like I said, this is a $569 bike, maybe $30. $30. It went up $30. It was $539 last year. So only went up $30. If you look at Kink's line, the whip went up $50, the switch went up $100, the Williams went up like $150, the Cloud, they all went up by significant amounts of money. Even the 2021 We the People bikes went up from the first batch that came to the US to the second batch that came to the US. So the fact that Cult bikes only went up this amount is very impressive to me, and kudos to them, because I think this is all speculation, but I think they're taking more of a hit on the cost of the bikes than they did last year, and they're not making you pay for that. Like, I think they're kind of meeting in the middle with it, and they pay some of it and charge a little bit extra for the bike so that it's not a huge jump in price. This is really admirable, and I'm glad it only went up $30. We were speculating on some of the lives that the 2022 Devotion would be closer to the $600 range, or right around $600, but you know, I'm impressed that it's only $569. That's awesome. Now, I do also really like these 3 colors. I think they're pretty unique. The white is Panza's signature color. The blue is a really cool Cavalry blue. And the black, like I said, boring black, okay? Anyway, let's talk about the quality of the Devotion, because that is what's really exciting to me. This is a full chromoly bike. Full chromoly frame, full chromoly forks, and full chromoly bars. This is good because if you get high tensile steel, it's going to bend and it's going to break. Because of this higher quality chromoly, the Cult Devotion is classified as a mid-level bike, meaning it can withstand mid-level tricks. The rims are also double wall. This is going to be twice as good as single wall. They're going to hold up as you start to do big drops and big gaps and spins. Again, this is adding to that mid-level quality title that the Cult Devotion gets. It does also come with 2 pegs. Now, it doesn't come with any hub guards, it just comes with 2 pegs, which is pretty cool because some companies don't even include pegs with their bikes. Sunday. You know, anyway, they don't include pegs on the X, and that's kind of that bugs me. But anyway, we're talking about Cult, not Sunday, so we're gonna carry on with that. No pegs, and the weight is hard to find. Cult, this is my bone to pick with Cult. Anyway, I'm gonna say the weight is, in 2021, it was about 26.8 pounds. So I don't know what they are this year. I'm gonna assume they're pretty close to the same. But Cult is kind of misleading with the information that they provide. For example, if you look at the Cult Control, I get in an argument with this all the time. If you look at the Cult Control on Cult's website, it just says Cult Match Rims. The Cult Devotion also has Cult Match rims, and the Cult Match rims are Cult's double wall aftermarket rims. However, there's Cult Match rims on all the Cult bikes, and they don't distinguish that the ones on like the Gateway are single wall and the ones on the Devotion are double wall. So they just put Cult Match. Like, it's kind of misleading and it drives me crazy. And then again, like I said, the information's not out there right away. They don't include the weights of the bikes. This year they didn't even include the standover height of the bike. So if I ever get my hands on one, I'll measure it and I'll weigh it just so I can put that on there. If you Google Cult Devotion weight, my website's the one that comes up because I think I found it scouring the internet and then threw it on the website so that it could come up. But anyway, that's the weight. That's what drives me crazy about Cult, but I'm still very excited about the Devotion. It's a really good quality bike. We're gonna see how well it scores in the quality section of the Dougsterbob score. But for now, let's move over and talk about the geometry. Now, the geometry of the Devotion is very interesting to me because the top tube is a 21-inch top tube. I ride 21-inch top tubes. I'm very tall. Make sure, Google Dougsterbob size guide to make sure that this is the right size for you, because if you get the wrong size top tube, it's going to make riding really hard. So just double check that and make sure this is the right size for you. But the interesting part is the chainstay. So the chainstay is going to be 13.65 inches, where most chainstays are around 13.2. So this is even longer. And when you get a longer chainstay, it's going to make it harder to pull up. It's going to make the bike very stable feeling. It's not going to be very responsive, and it's not going to be very easy to maneuver around. Now, this long chainstay does have benefits. Like, it's good for people who like to go high and fast, like Chris Fox or Gary Young or Chase Hawk. Like, that type of riding with a longer chainstay is going to feel really mellow. It's going to feel really flowy. If that's not necessarily your type of riding, this is a very big chainstay and it's going to feel really weird to you. The head tube angle is 75 degrees, which is about normal, and the standover height is question mark. We don't actually know what the standover height is yet, but I'm gonna guess it's right around 9 inches. This is something that it's really just personal preference, but the standover height, if you have a really tall standover height, it could make grabbing the seat easier for toboggans or pinching the seat when you throw bar spins. It has some perks, but not many. Mostly it's just a personal preference thing. Now, the Dougsterbob scores. This is a scoring system that I created to rank all the bikes out there for how good they are in street, park, dirt, how good their quality is, and everything like that. If you want this score sheet, you can compare over 80 different bikes to one another. You can sort them by how good they are in street or how good they are in dirt and find literally the perfect bike. The link is in the description. Just put in your email address. I'll send you the link and you can check it out. I just updated this sheet, so it's always updated and you'll always get the updated version. So do that. But anyway, let's talk about the Devotion scores. In street, it scored a 4. This is not a great street score, and it could have done better if it came with a free coaster, if it had more pegs, more hub guards, but it's not super street specific out of the box. You can always make the upgrades for street, but it doesn't come that way, and that's why it only scored a 4. In park, though, it did really bad. It scored a 1.67. We're gonna round this up to a 2. This is not a park specific bike, mostly because of that really big geometry that we were talking about in the frame. That's gonna make technical park riding pretty hard to do. And yeah, you can't even put a gyro on it. It has this hourglass head tube angle, or head tube. So the head tube's hourglass shape. There's no holes drilled for a gyro. And it'd just be a pain to put a gyro on it and be really technical with park riding. So that's why it only scored a 2. In dirt, it scored a 4.33. We're gonna round this down to a 4. This isn't a dirt specific bike, but if you were someone who liked to ride street and you like to ride dirt, this is a solid option. It's got that big geometry, so it's gonna feel stable, it's gonna feel controlled at high speeds on the dirt jumps or on the pump track. It has tall 9-inch bars that are gonna feel comfortable when you're riding dirt. And like I said, not dirt specific, but it's not a bad choice if you're a beginner dirt rider. Now the quality score is a 6.25. We're gonna round this down to a 6. Full chromoly frame, forks, bars, double wall rims, a little bit of aftermarket parts. This is a pretty good quality score. Now it's not the best quality score like the We the People Envy or the Sunday Soundwave, but it's a pretty good score, especially considering this bike is just over 550 bucks. You literally can't go wrong. Some similar priced options would be the Sunday X for about $640. The quality of the X isn't even close to the Devotion, and the X doesn't come with pegs. And the Kink Switch is a $599 bike. It does come with pegs, it comes with a free coaster, it comes with 4-piece bars, and it's about the same level of quality for a little bit more money. I've got in-depth reviews on both of those bikes, so before you pull the trigger and make the purchase on the Devotion, I urge you to check out those other 2 reviews and see if you like one of those bikes better than this bike. Now, what are some potential issues that I see with the Devotion? The only issue that I can think of right off the top of my head would be that longer chainstay. Chainstay does affect your riding and affect how the bike feels more than you can imagine. And riding a 13.6-inch chainstay, if you're a smaller person, is going to be really tough for you. So just have that in mind. This is a long chainstay. It has pros, but it also has cons. And the big con to that is not being able to throw the bike around and maneuver it like you probably want to. If you ride something like a 12.75, you can toss that thing around, you can snap spins really aggressively, and you won't be able to do that with this bigger Devotion chainstay. Now, who is the Cult Devotion for? The Cult Devotion is going to be for somebody who's already riding at about a mid-level. It's got that higher quality that can withstand big drops, big gaps, and mid-level tricks, but you have to be a pretty tall rider. I'd say you're anywhere from 6 foot to 6'4", because that 21-inch top tube and that longer chainstay is going to feel really hard to control for smaller riders. So if you're between 6 foot, 6'4", you like riding street and a little bit of dirt, and you have about a $600 budget, the Cult Devotion would be a really good choice for you. But would I actually recommend the Devotion? And the answer is going to be yes. I think this is a really good bike for a really good price. You're getting a good amount of quality, you're getting some pegs, and it's a solid bike. And I'm very, very impressed that the price did not go up very much this year. So good job, Colt, for that one. And I do recommend this bike if you are the right size for it. Now guys, if you're a smaller rider, I do not recommend this for you. Even though it's cool, even though it's Anthony Panza's signature, you're gonna shoot yourself in the foot by getting a really small or getting a really tall bike and being a really small rider. It's going to be so hard to control and so hard to progress. Please make sure you get the right size bike. Now, I love Colt. I love their aftermarket parts, and I love some of their complete bikes. If you did not love any of these bikes, don't forget about the free bike recommendation in there, but the Dougsterbob score sheet is also in the description. All these tools are going to help you out so much. If you enjoyed any part of this video, one little part, smash that like button. But more importantly, guys, I just want you to come back, watch the next video, because I'm always putting out helpful content for new BMX riders. Have a good rest of your day. Thanks for watching.